In the last few years, the preservation of the so-called liberal world order has become a commonplace catchphrase in much of the Western world, especially amongst policymakers, scholars, and journalists. The cornerstone of this project encompasses ingredients such as a rule-based international system, the need for an institutionalized governance as a guarantor of multilateral collaboration, economic globalization as a path to a shared, harmonious prosperity, and the expansion of liberal democracy on a global scale as the natural course of history. According to its believers, this pursuit is a priority to ensure the prevalence of everlasting peace in a better world. They are so convinced of the theoretical and moral virtues that underpin this vision that its desirability is automatically taken for granted. However, it is pertinent to assess from a dispassionate viewpoint if this utopian dream is even achievable. The ideological roots of this transformative endeavor include contributions like weak historiography and Wilsonian idealism, which reflect to anthropological optimistic premise that there is an arc of moral universe that bends towards justice and progress. The messianic desire to declare the end of history in the early post-Cold War era were inspired by the same creed. Likewise, the Davos-man enthusiasts of a borderless world in which technocratic, supranational structures would permanently supersede the malign and anachronistic influence of high politics also share the perception that these truths are self-evident. Yet, the intellectual skepticism of the realist school, which emphasizes of importance of power, security, stability, and the balance above all else in the dangerous arena of international politics, about its convenience and feasibility is well known. Realists contented the quixotic quests to reach a utopian horizon, even if it is motivated by good intentions, can bring about nightmarish outcomes, including war, bloodshed, and chaos. For realism, daydreaming is a recipe for disaster. However, the main problem with the idea of establishing a liberal world order is not the challenge posed by realist thinkers. Rather, the most significant shortcoming of said model is that none of its underlying assumptions are supported by empirical reality or historical experience, as the following illustrates. Liberal idealists contended that universal rules of behavior are necessary for the well-being of the international community. These codes will ensure that the global village becomes a peaceful garden rather than ruthless Darwinian jungle. However, this vision is inaccurate because it overlooks quintessential political realities that cannot be ignored only because they are unpleasant. First, as the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes explained centuries ago, the enforcement of rules presupposes the existence of a legitimate, uncontested authority which holds a monopolistic coercive power. Under such conditions, all states have no choice but to increase their own power in order to protect their security and satisfy their interests, even disregarding rules if necessary. There are many recent examples which show that powerful states can seldom be held accountable, let alone punished, for their blatant violations of international law, including acts of war, the instigation of coups, covert interventions, sabotage, acts of espionage, and even assassinations. Relying on one's own capabilities and resources offers a much higher degree of security than blind trust in written or unwritten rules only backed by promises of goodwill. As the Greek historian Thucydides put it, justice can only prevail when there is a balanced correlation of force. In contrast, when a profound disparity prevails, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Another element that needs to be highlighted is that rules are never neutral. They serve political masters. Not surprisingly, rules are made by victors who may manage to vanquish their rivals and reach a superior hierarchical position. Paraphrasing von Clausewitz, a conqueror is always a lover of rules enable the continuations of the status quo. Furthermore, the existence of rules also reveals a symmetric power relation between those who make them based on their preferences and those that have no choice but to follow them, regardless of whether like them or not. Accordingly, there can be no universal legitimate rules because those states that do not find them favorable for their interests have a strong incentive to overturn them and, if possible, rewrite them. Likewise, there is no such thing as an international community. Such terms is a vague abstraction that has no real substance. In the political sphere, there is a myriad of heterogeneous policies that can cooperate or clash based on the alignment of their interests. Hence, the pursuit of particular interests can be whitewashed with universalistic rhetoric, particularly in the case of empires that seek to place many different nations under their umbrella. Yet, perhaps the most damning indictment of this idea is the fact that it ignores that politics is not about procedures. The nature of politics involves power, struggle, and control. In this regard, man is a political animal whose behavior is driven by what Hans Morgenthau called the animus dominandi, a natural inclination to rise above his peers in matters related to power, prosperity, and prestige. The liberal gospel seeks to abolish the concept of the political identified by Carl Schmitt, the collective distinction between friends and enemies, a distinction that often turns deadly when things become ugly and politicians have no choice but to engage in existential struggles. States can abolish the concept of the political if they wish to pretend that the impersonal forces that fuel conflict can be tamed, but only at their own peril, because the logical outcome of such folly is to be ultimately crushed by somebody that has not forgotten what the political is all about. Even if certain states prefer not to be interested in war, war might be interested in them anyway. The theoretical idea of establishing a liberal world order is not supported by empirical facts on the ground. Such a thing has never existed in the first place, and its eventual materialization would require the transformation of both human nature and the structure of this international system, both of which remain unchanged. Reality is stubborn and unpleasant. Under this circumstance, there is no new man to speak of. Since a liberal world order is an illusory mirage, it would be wise to consider realistic alternatives, including an illiberal forms of US hegemony, the regional fragmentation of the world order as a result of a bipolar or multipolar configuration, conflict or chaos. Those who refuse to see the proverbial writing on the wall and dismiss these possibilities only because they do not sound optimistic will likely experience a rude awakening. Nevertheless, this illusion is not just a cognitive or intellectual shortcoming. A flawed interpretation of reality can lead to pragmatic mistakes and nasty consequences. After all, the road to hell is often paved with good intentions. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to the channel.